This is Join Us in France, episode 300. Drumroll. Or not. Bonjour, I'm Annie Sargent, and today I bring you a conversation with Elyse about Castelnaudary, a medium-sized city an hour south of Toulouse, and a great place to consider if you're looking for a place to buy a house that's not too far from a large city, with reasonable prices, quick access to the freeway, and plenty of charm. When I recorded this episode with Elyse, I hadn't been to Castelnaudary for a long time, or at least I forgot I had. But my husband and I took a trip there just a couple of days ago, and I'll tell you more about it in my personal update. Thank you, patrons, for giving me a precious gift, the time to produce this podcast. Your monthly gift makes it all possible, and in these times of great uncertainty and anxiety, I cannot tell you how much it means to me. A shout out to new patrons and more info on how to join all my wonderful patrons after the interview. Check out my audio self-guided tours on joinusinfrance.com/audio tours. As I record this, I have 4 of them for Paris, and I will release more as time goes by because I love the freedom and the depth that these tours provide. Show notes for this episode are on joinusinfrance.com/300, the number 300, where you can see a recap of what we've discussed and download the PDF I'll mention later. Follow Addicted to France on Instagram to see my photos of Castelnaudary, and I'll post them this week. Well, starting this week. I'm still getting feedback from the fun recipe newsletter I sent out a week ago. If you'd like to subscribe, go to joinusinfrance.com and look for the green button that says Extras. Bonjour, Elyse.
Bonjour, Annie.
You look good today.
Do I?
Nice and red.
I'm red and you are blue. All we need is some white and we have the French and American flags.
Yes, that's right.
Oh, tomorrow's the 14th, so I guess that's appropriate.
Yeah. We are recording this right on the 13th of July, but it won't come out for a long time.
For a long time.
Yeah, till. But we have some celebrating to do.
We do indeed.
Because the podcast is now over 300 episodes. It's a big deal for a podcast. Not that many podcasts make it to 300.
Is that right?
Oh, it's very unusual.
Really?
As a matter of fact, most podcasters, they do like 5 or 10 and then they quit.
They quit.
Because they realize it's hard. It's hard work.
Yep. Well, Annie, you are not a quitter. That is definitely the case.
That's true. So I just wanted to say a few things about the podcast. It started in February 12th, 2014 is when I put out the first episode. We've had 1.7 million downloads so far.
Unbelievable.
So it's a lot of people have listened to these episodes. Yep. And every week I get a few people writing to me saying, thank you for the podcast, whatever. So it's been wonderful that way. I also want to point out that I have never taken a freebie or even a discount for anything travel related since I started the podcast. So I know a lot of travel podcasters, their mojo is they reach out to travel companies and hotels and restaurants and they say, hey, I'll come and test your thing and then I'll talk about it on the podcast and say nice things. I have never done that. I will never do that. Eventually, I might take advertisers, but you'll know it'll be very clear. This is an ad.
This is an ad, right?
And not... I also get all the time people who reach out to me because they want to talk about the book they wrote. And I've only had a few on the podcast like that because it just feels, I don't know. I'd rather talk to regular visitors who come to France and want to talk about it. Or you, Elyse, obviously, because you've been on what, almost 100 times by now?
No, over 180.
Oh my goodness. See, that's a lot.
Over 180, Annie.
You see? So it's wonderful to have, I think it's wonderful to have a travel related podcast that is not purely let me get freebies.
That's disinterested. Let's put it that way.
That's right. It's disinterested. Not that I don't like having patrons.
Right.
You know, let me be frank about that too. And you like having patrons too. But that is completely separate from whatever we recommend or we like. So if we say we like a hotel, it's not because we got free nights at that hotel. It's because we like it.
Yeah.
Or if I bring on a guest who wants to talk about the restaurants they like, the hotels they like, totally fine. And they're not getting paid for it either. So I think that's really valuable. And that's extremely different from all other travel podcasts.
Right. It is, because indeed it is. It's just really a service to people that has nothing to do with commercialization. Really.
Right.
That's what it is. You know, and I think that it is really nice to have people know that, and also to have the feedback from people who appreciate it, which of course is what happens if they do Patreon or if they do anything else like that.
Right. For the longest time, the podcast was not on a strict schedule, so I would release it whenever it was ready. For many years now, I've been releasing once a week on the same day. It was on a Wednesday, I think.
It used to be, yeah.
Right, and now it's on a Sunday. But most of this time, I have released one episode a week, other than... You know, sometimes I've taken a couple of weeks off for a vacation or whatever. I don't think I'll even do that this summer because I'm not going anywhere because of the pandemic. So there you go.
So there you go.
The most popular episode we have released is episode number 179, which has to do with, it's called Things to Do in Paris for First-Time Visitors. Mm-hmm. And obviously people, you know, they have to find... when they're searching for something specific, that's how they find us. And hopefully a lot of the people who start listening to that one then go on to listen to many of the other ones. So there you go. So a celebration for both of us, because 300 is a big achievement.
It is indeed.
And I also want to mention that going forward, the older episodes will start falling off the application, the list that you see in your podcasting app. That doesn't mean that they're not, that you can't listen to them anymore. But going forward, these older episodes, you'll have to listen to them on the website. They won't be available anymore in your app, because the way apps work is that it's Apple Podcasts. Almost every app, podcast app, no matter what it is, will pull from a directory called Apple Podcasts. And they have a rule that they only list 300 episodes. And so once I have 305, the first 5 are not listed. You can still listen to them on the website. So there you go. Done with the celebrations. Let's talk about Castelnaudary.
Castelnaudary. And I just would like you, Annie, since you are native to Toulouse, maybe just this time you can do this with a Toulouse accent to put us in the mood.
Comment je dirais Castelnaudary?
Castelnaudary, I don't know.
Castelnaudary Kong. Je vais à Castelnaudary.
Especially because the new Prime Minister of France is someone named Jean Castex, who comes from the Gers, which is just to the west of Toulouse. And there's a big to-do right now going on in France about the fact that he has an accent.
So he's interesting because his accent is obviously very controlled, like mine. I hated having a Toulouse accent growing up. I hated it.
Did you really?
I could hear it. I hated it. And I worked on losing it. But mind you, I did the same with English, because when I showed up in the US, I had lived in the UK for 2 years.
And so you had a British accent.
And I had a very British accent. And I hated that people made me repeat stuff. And so I lost it. I just worked on it. And now I'm incapable of imitating it.
It's so funny. That's interesting because, of course, I was born and grew up in New York. And when I moved to California to finish my studies, I actually worked on getting rid of my New York accent.
There you go.
But it stays somehow in the back. When I get very excited or very upset about something, it comes out again.
It comes back, doesn't it?
But it's very interesting because yesterday in the local newspaper, in the Dépêche, there was a big 2-page spread about what's wrong with people in France, that they don't like people from the South with their accents, you see. Everybody's making fun of the Prime Minister already because he has an accent.
Right, and he doesn't have a strong accent. I bet if you put him with his relatives and they're just talking between themselves...
Yeah, I bet it's stronger.
It's much stronger. Because if I'm talking with my siblings, it comes right back.
There you are.
Because I'm not trying. See, because that's a situation where you relax and you just talk, whatever.
It is at the same time. It's kind of nice to have regional accents,
Oh, it's lovely. I've so outgrown that. I think it was silly of me to be so worried about it.
But it is interesting that it's very snobbish, especially for television and for politicians. You know, it's like you're not supposed to have an accent if you want to be high up in something.
So I listen to all these shows, France Culture, France Inter. And they sometimes have historians who are clearly from the South, the Southwest. And some of them, I just delight in their accent. And the presenter always has to comment on it.
Has to comment on it.
Yeah, they have to say something. They can't just be shut up about it.
No. So, and this is, of course, connected to just talking today about this town that's actually, halfway between here and Carcassonne.
Yep.
Most people, I would bet, if they've been to Toulouse and they've gone to Carcassonne, just go right past.
Right, on the highway.
On the highway.
Yeah.
Castelnaudary. And it is, I wanted to call this talking about the 3 C's. Castelnaudary, the town, Canal du Midi, and Cassoulet.
Cassoulet, of course.
The 3 C's. There we go.
Right.
Yeah.
And of course, Cassoulet, there's a competition to know where it started.
Yes.
So is it Carcassonne, is it Castelnaudary, or is it Toulouse?
Right.
So we're always discussing this, but who cares?
Well, actually, as far as what I was going to talk about is like I was doing some research this morning, and I think Castelnaudary can legitimately say that it started there. I mean,
you will give them the upper hand.
What an advance on everybody else. So,
maybe.
No. So let's begin the beginning. So Castelnau, it means Newcastle, which probably isn't that hard to figure out. But I was always really curious about why Castelnaudary, which is written now in ARY. Right? And it turns out that because in the beginning, which is really a long time ago, which is over 1,000 years ago, it was Castelnau, meaning Newcastle, and then it was D''ARRI. So it was the Newcastle of Ari, whoever that was.
Okay.
I have no idea.
Good for him.
But it was the castle of this lord.
Right, because in another direction, we have Castelnau d'Estrettefond, which is it's a much smaller town. Right. But we have a lot of Castelnau.
We have a lot of Castelnau.
In the south of France.
Because we have a lot of castle.
Yes, new ones.
We have a lot of them.
Of course, they're from the 1200s.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
But they're still the new ones.
It was like, ooh, we got a brand new house here now, come and visit, It's like, wow, we got another fortified castle going up. Look at how modern this one is inside.
Cool.
We're so cool, It's like, and actually, the reason why is because for a very long time, and of course, a long time in France means really a long time, Castelnau Castelnaudary was actually the siège or the capital of a little area that was a little province called the Lauragais.
The Lauragais. We actually did an episode about the Lauragais. I can't remember what number it was. I'll link to it
in the numbers of things like that, right?
Yeah, but I'll link to it in the show notes.
And at the time, before the French Revolution, there was a lord in that area, and so that was why this fortified castle was actually built in this little town, which is on record from starting at just about the 1100s, So before that, I'm sure there was some kind of settlement there. The Romans didn't think it was very important. They were interested in going from Narbonne to Toulouse, and Carcassonne was a stop. But so Castelnau just somehow didn't hit the Romans in the eye at all. But it has always been very important because it is the center of the wheat growing area. And that is there are still silos on the outskirts of the town.
Yep.
It's really, really, really important as the major production there. The actual city of Castelnaudary has about 11,000 people.
Yep. I looked at the population. It looks like it was going up in the last 50 years, and now it's down a tiny bit.
A little bit. You know why?
No.
Because I don't know what the percentage is, but a good, let's say at least 20% of the population was British.
Oh.
Yep. And so they're leaving, or they have left. Castelnaudary is actually, I was looking at some interesting statistics about it, because it is a town that has three economic activities. Though obviously the grains, mostly wheat, is extremely important. It also is the home for a base for the Foreign Legion. Which is really important there. You don't see it when you go through the old city center. But it also is a commercial base. And in fact, not that everyone approves of it, but there's an enormous Amazon depot that is in the process of opening up right on the outskirts of Castelnaudary. But it has a large proportion of retired people.
Yeah.
Which is changing because of the dynamic of the economics with Amazon coming in and other things like that. And a lot of retired people from England moved into Castelnaudary, or just the teeny little areas, right around it, that helped create a certain dynamic activity for the town. So I think that is one of the reasons why it is suddenly starting to lose a few people.
Well, go back up if there's an Amazon depot. More
right.
young
and it'll
people
be younger people.
Stay. Yeah,
and it'll be younger people, which makes it really interesting. So it turns out that...
But it's one of these towns that if you're looking for a place to buy in France,
yes,
that you don't want it to be too expensive and you don't want it to be too far away in the boonies, Castelnaudary would be a good choice because it's big enough to have some real life.
Yes.
It has a hospital, it has high schools, it has all sorts of things.
It has two high schools.
Yeah.
It has a cinema.
Yeah. So there's some life there. But at the same time, it's not Toulouse where you'll pay a lot more for the same, And but as a matter of fact, it looks like most of the houses, most people live in a house, even if they're renting. They're mostly renting houses.
And you know what? Now, this is why I came upon this as a statistic. It was just actually fascinating to read. It's a town, I don't know how many like that in France, where the average size of the apartment or house is fairly large.
Yeah.
So that there are very few tiny little habitats there. In other words, everything is...
studios and stuff.
Right, very little. So it means that it has, we could say, a fairly large middle-class population. It's not a rich town. It's not a super rich town, but it's very pleasant. Mm-hmm. And it has some very, very good restaurants. And of course, that's not just connected to the Cassoulet, which we could talk about in a minute. But what's interesting is that, of course, even though it only has ruins now of the castle, and the ruins there's a little bit of the ruins that are visible when you walk through the old city center, but it became important again after going through some really rough times. Now, Castelnaudary is right off the autoroute that takes you literally from the Mediterranean to Toulouse, and then if you keep going, of course, you eventually get to Bordeaux. It's at the
Carcassonne.
Yeah, if you go from Narbonne to Carcassonne and then Castelnau and then Toulouse, and then eventually, if you keep going
a long way,
you eventually get to the Atlantic, right? But what I didn't know, of course, was that it was the place of one of the worst battles between the English and the French during the 100 Years' War. Mm. And unlike Toulouse, maybe because it was smaller, I really don't know why, it was the Black Prince, the bad guy, who was the head of these bandits. I mean, the English army, they weren't really Brits with an accent from England. They were people loyal to the English king.
Yeah.
And they were marauders, and they pillaged everywhere. And when the English king basically went, I give up, I'm going back to my island, kind of thing. They just started really devastating the whole southwest of France. And it turns out that in the year 1365, they attacked the city of Castelnaudary and literally almost burned the entire city to the ground. Killed most of the people. I mean, they were really nasty,
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
that doesn't sound good.
They were really not very nice. No. So it was rebuilt. So except for vestiges of this old feudal castle, the oldest parts of Castelnaudary really are only from after that. So, for here, that's medium old, 1400, it's medium old, But its big day came when Pierre-Paul Riquet was in the process of laying out the plan for the Canal du Midi. Mm-hmm. And of course, it starts at Toulouse and winds up at the Mediterranean. And he was trying to plot out the different places along the way. And one of the things that's interesting about the canal is that in order for places to be included as rest stops, they did have to offer some financial incentive, which is one of the reasons why in Carcassonne they had to add on a little strip afterwards, because when the canal was finished, Carcassonne, which had snubbed it, kind of went, oops, oh, I think we made a mistake here. Oh, dear.
Yeah.
So, but Castelnaudary was very, very, whoever was running the city at the time, because this is the 1600s, this is obviously pre-revolution, they went right to Riquet and they said, we would like to have Castelnaudary be a very important center for the canal. And so how they worked this out, I really don't know. But they created what is called the Granbasang, which is this space, I guess in English it's called a basin. And it's
It's like a lake.
Yeah, it's like an enclosed lake that's 7 hectares, which is about 20 acres in size. And what it has is that you have the canal coming in on one side and then going out on the other side with 2 very beautiful locks. And in the middle of it, there's an island. And it's an island that's an artificial island, or was basically created now. Of course, it doesn't look artificial at all, called L'Île de la Cybèle.
Yep.
Why, I don't know it's called that. I have no idea.
Is it S-Y?
C-Y.
C-Y.
C-Y-B-E-L-E with an accent. And the island was put there to be a windbreaker. Because the Lauragais is an area that you and I know is an area that's famous for having a lot of wind.
Yeah.
The hills around it, that's why there's a lot of windmills,
wind turbines,
turbines there now. And so they were really thinking well ahead, because what they did was they agreed to make it the center for all the technology. Now, I don't know exactly what that meant in the 1660s, 1670s when they were actually building the canal, but they basically, it was like this was going to be the place where they were going to work out all their technological problems for the rest of the canal. And so it helped the town grow and become prosperous, because it was the center for where they loaded and unloaded most of the wheat that went to the Mediterranean. And Toulouse, of course, is where the canal actually ends or begins, depending upon which side you start from. But Castelnaudary was the most important part for the commerce of the things that were taken on the barges that moved in and out.
Now, when you say it ends in Toulouse, you mean the thing named the Canal du Midi. There's another canal that goes all the way to Bordeaux.
That came 100 years later.
It came later, but,
yes.
And it's not named Canal du Midi anymore.
No, it's the Canal
des Deux Mers.
It's the Canal des Deux Mers.
Yeah.
Right. So the Canal du Midi was basically really, the inception was from Toulouse to the Mediterranean.
Yeah.
But they had to figure out, of course, how to do all of that. And that's the whole story of Riquet and how he...
And we've also had episodes about that.
And we've had episodes about that. And it is really beautiful, And so it's very lovely. So the oldest part of the town is centered really around the canal and this basin. And it's really lovely. And since I was really just there a week ago, it's charming. It's absolutely charming. And you have lots and lots of boats. So you have both private boats owned by people who keep them there, kind of on an auxiliary little canal that goes off to the side. And then you have 2 companies that, of course, rent enormous numbers of boats, which, of course, unfortunately right now for them are mostly docked.
Really?
Yeah, not too many people are going out these days,
Oh, I thought it was the opposite. I thought that it was a very desirable kind of travel because you're in your own thing. Maybe later on this summer, more French people will do that, because obviously it's kind of like being in your own car. I mean, you don't have to worry too much about contact. But it's true that all the people that I've talked to who took a cruise on the Canal du Midi, they were all English speakers. I've never had a French person tell me, this summer we're taking a cruise on the Canal du Midi.
Yeah.
Because it's just not something we think about. Like, we know these towns. Like, Castelnaudary, to me, is the place where we stopped to take a potty break. Because when I was a kid, we'd go from Toulouse to Valras-Plage, all the way near Béziers. And back then, there was no freeway.
That's right.
So we had to go through all the little towns, and we'd go through Castelnaudary, and we often stopped to pee at the gas station.
But, it's really interesting that, we stopped there, and of course I must say, it really was charming. I mean, there's this 2 little, cafe bakeries that are right along the canal, and it's just very pretty now. And so we decided to go and ask how much it would cost, because to my great surprise, my husband said, gee, it might be interesting to go out for a few days, which really surprised me, because you go very slowly on the canal. This is, this is not like Speedy Gonzales stuff kind of thing. And he was saying, not necessarily from there, but really a little bit further east. When you get a little bit closer to the Mediterranean, it might be really fun to do. But nobody could give us a price. And what was really surprising to me was that almost every single boat was docked. And so I think it's just that the virus is keeping people away from things in general. But most of the time, it is...
But I saw some ads on Facebook. So if they're advertising on Facebook, they must be wanting to find customers.
Yeah, I'm sure that they are. Yeah. And maybe this is
French
the time to get a good deal, because it is lovely. I mean, and you can go and just take it for a day. You can take it for a few days. You can.
Yeah, I can't imagine that I would love doing that for more than 2 or 3 days.
It depends on which part. I think I would like it if it's the part closest to the Mediterranean, because that's the part on the canal that I've never really seen, you know. But you're right.
Yeah, because around here I've walked it, I've biked it,
exactly.
It's like...
Right. Yeah, I know.
It's not exciting. I mean,
I know.
When it's home, it's not as exciting.
Exactly. But did you know, for instance, that basin is now a World UNESCO Heritage Site?
Oh.
Since 1997.
They'll really slap that onto anything, don't they?
Well, I guess it's because they consider it to be the no, that's not the word I want. It's the center. I'm leaving out whatever that word was I was trying to say. It's the center of really where they worked on all the technological aspects for the Canal du Midi.
I see.
So they included the basin as part of the whole thing. So
did they have a museum or something for the canal there?
They probably do, but since we were there on a Sunday morning, I didn't find it. And Castelnaudary is also considered to be it has the label of Ville Fleurie.
Okay.
And Pavillon Bleu.
What does that mean?
What that means is that the waters there are very, very clean.
Oh, cool.
And that it's got basically a green label, so that they take care of, apparently, the waters of the canal. They take care of the waters of the basin. And they make sure that all of it... I was really impressed by how clean everything was there, to be honest. And the old city center is not that big, but it's really quite charming. I was surprised, I must admit. Like you, I mean, it's a place that is like, okay, Castelnaudary, okay.
I'll have to go take some photos, because I don't have any photos of Castelnaudary.
I have a couple I'll give you that are that we took of the basin, so that it's really not... I mean, just it's big enough so that it feels like a nice lake, it's even though it is specifically connected to the Canal du Midi. Yeah.
So they do have a musée called the Musée du Lauragais. And then they have a theater and a médiathèque.
And the médiathèque.
And École musicale municipale. They have a big band. So they have a big their marching band.
Oh yeah,
participates in competitions.
In the competitions,
just like in my village, we have a big marching band that's disproportionate to the size of the village.
Well, that's true, but that was something I think for a long time that was very popular in little villages, wasn't it? In France?
Indeed, yes.
What they call what do you call it? There's a word for that. Fanfare.
A fanfare, oui.
Fanfare. It was mostly horns and stuff like that. Right?
I mean, there's drums, horns.
Yeah. So, and then of course the third thing about it is that it's famous for cassoulet.
Cassoulet, of course.
Okay. So, it turns out there is a legend that during this 100 Years' War, just about the time when it was under siege by the Black Prince and these bad guys, that poor people in the area were scraping together whatever they could find, and they put all of the little pieces of leftover meat together with some beans, which at the time had to have been fava beans, because the white bean that now grows in the area that is really expensive was not yet brought from the Americas, because this is the 1300s. and that they put it all together and they made this dish that gave the people enough force to fight back the English. Well, of course, yeah. But the problem is that, of course, they didn't really fight back the English, so we can discount that legend completely, unfortunately, even though they like to say it. But there are legitimate reasons to apparently claim that the dish itself, as it's known now, did start there. And apparently there were two people who defended this idea, and one of them was Anatole France.
Anatole France, tiens.
Anatole France, yeah. Well, Anatole France, who, for whatever reason, I have no idea what happened, why he decided for sure it had to have started there. He wrote this article and said, the best cassoulet I have ever had, because it is basically a dish you do find in other places in the Southwest, is from Castelnaudary, and therefore it must have started here. Okay. Well, I mean,
whatever.
Whatever. There's also, in the 1650s, believe it or not, there was a cookbook written in 1654 by Taillevent.
Qui?
Taillevent, who was one of the very first. So 1650s is Louis XIV.
Spell.
Taille, Taille, Vent, Vent.
Okay.
And he was a cook. I don't know if he was actually at Versailles, but he was one of the first people to write like a very important official cookbook kind of thing. And he describes the stew that basically sounds an awful lot like Cassoulet. I was about to say a stew like Castelnaudary, yeah. A stew like Cassoulet. And that is apparently the first time it's mentioned anywhere. But its name is mentioned as Cassoulet exactly 100 years later.
Okay.
So in the middle of the 1700s, it actually starts to be called Cassoulet, and that for sure is because there is this ceramic dish called the Cassole.
Oui, la Cassole ou la Cassolette.
Which started to be used in Castelnaudary for cooking this dish.
Yeah.
And that is when it got its name.
Right.
Okay. So you can decide whether you agree that it comes from Castelnaudary or not. But this is what really makes it interesting. There are, of course, the three places that claim to be the origin: Castelnaudary, Toulouse, and Carcassonne. So do you know, Annie, what the difference is in the three recipes?
No.
Well, neither did I, but I'll tell you right now, in case you were wondering. And by the way, everybody out there, this is a winter dish.
Yeah.
I would not suggest trying to eat this in the summertime.
Yeah, because it's very hot.
It's very
temperature-wise, it's very rich.
I mean, this is beans and meat with a little bit of sauce cooked in the oven, and it's very good.
Yeah,
it really is.
And it sticks to your ribs.
It
like
sticks
nobody's
to
business.
all of your ribs, not just a few of them. I mean, really, So the Castelnaudary recipe, which is now the recipe that uses a white bean called the haricot blanc de l'Oreguais, which is, believe it or not, a bean that costs 30 euros the kilo.
Yeah, right. That's why I've never used it.
Okay. There's also another bean called the tarbé.
Oui, le tarbé, c'est pareil, c'est cher.
They're unbelievably expensive, these beans. I mean, ladies and gentlemen out there, 30 euros a kilo. That's like $35 for 2 pounds of a bean. Okay?
Yeah. No, that's ridiculous.
So the Castelnaudary recipe uses that. It uses it uses goose, not duck.
Oh, right.
Jarret or shoulder of pork.
Okay.
Sausage, but it doesn't say Toulouse sausage.
Okay.
And then the leek carrot and a little bit of celery that are used to give flavor to the sauce.
Yeah.
And it's all, of course, all cooked together in this ceramic dish.
Yeah.
It turns out that the addition of breadcrumbs, which is something I'm familiar with.
Oh, on top, yeah.
Is Toulouse.
I see. Okay.
And in Toulouse, traditionally, and of course this is all basically the traditional differences in the recipes. In Toulouse, it was duck, not goose.
Yeah, but they taste the same.
You don't usually find goose pretty much anywhere. And Toulouse sausage.
Yeah.
And they add, interestingly, a clove they stick a clove into a piece of onion that they put in with it to cook it. So it adds a teeny little of some kind of spice to it. I don't remember ever tasting that. But it's mostly the difference with the breadcrumbs that apparently is the original little addition of the Toulouse recipe.
Okay.
And according to what I read, in Carcassonne, they sometimes add lamb, which makes it very different. But I've never had it with lamb.
I've had cassoulet in Carcassonne, but I don't remember.
I don't think I've ever had it with lamb. No.
Yeah, that doesn't.
But it is a fact that 80%. And now this is a dish, and I have a friend who's French who makes lots of things herself. She does her own foie gras and all of this. She originally is from Villefranche-de-Lauragais, so she's really from that area, right? And she, in spite of making everything herself, has told me that this is the one dish where she would buy the top grade canned version, and it is really excellent.
So in the Southwest, you can buy cassoulet in a big can, a 2.5 kilo can. Right. So that would serve 4, probably.
Yep, exactly.
And that's what I've done in the past. Like, we don't have to make this stuff because
it takes forever.
It takes forever. And it's the sort of dish that tastes better the next day. So if it's canned, it's really had time to sit in the, all the flavors. And it's really delicious. Now, you don't want to go too cheap.
No.
You need to buy a good quality. But that's what I've done. Like, I think I have made cassoulet from scratch once when I lived in the U.S., and it's a ton of work.
It's a lot of work. And getting all those different pieces of meat.
Right. In the U.S., you can't really get duck fat.
No.
You can't. I mean, you could buy duck, I guess, if you went to...
You don't get really good sausage.
I lived in the West, so in the West, sometimes... The stores that sell to Mexicans will have a Mexican butcher, so they might have duck, but you have to hunt around for it. Like, it's not something you can find easily. And so I don't know. If you want cassoulet, just eat it when you're in France.
Yeah, and so this is what it says, which is very interesting. It says 80% of the high quality cassoulet is produced in Castelnaudary.
I see.
There are 3 companies there that are really the top notch.
Yeah.
And they do produce 80% of it,
Right.
And it says, it's interesting because they say, if you really want to taste good cassoulet, get one of those brands. Really.
Yeah.
I mean, we now know that, most of the supermarkets have a real cheapo version of it, but that's going to be your Franks and Beans, I mean, it's just not the same.
Yeah.
Totally
no, I've really enjoyed eating cassoulet in winter.
Yes.
But I must admit, the process of making it is... And I've read... So it's funny because there's a lot of food bloggers who talk about cassoulet like it's the,
That high up. Okay,
and they all make me laugh. And they insist that you have to have the Cassolette, so you have to have the right kind of earthenware
recipient.
Earthenware pots.
Right.
No, you don't. Come on, people. It's a pot.
It's a pot.
You don't mess around with my head.
Well, the thing is,
I've been cooking for decades. I know that if it's in a earthen pot or in a stainless steel pot, will make zero difference to the taste.
Well, of course, it looks better. Original. It looks prettier that way.
Right, it looks better, but it makes no difference.
I think it has to do with the fact that, these are purists because the original way of cooking it was taking all this stuff, putting it in an oven and leaving it there for a whole day on a very low flame.
Yeah, but the original way was probably whatever you had left, you scraped it up and you threw it in a pan.
And you put it in. And it just cooked on a fire because it was over a fire and this big thing for a very, very long time.
And there's still people who do that. There's still restaurants, but it's gimmicky. Because if you do it on a fire, you can't control the temperature.
This is my question. How do you know? It's a real question. How do you know when a restaurant is really making it themselves?
I have no idea.
Because you can see restaurants. Well, first of all, we drove through the main part of Castelnaudary.
Honestly.
And then in Toulouse. I mean, some of them say, homemade cassoulet. How do you really know?
Because it could be homemade if they buy, a big can of the beans and a big can of the duck, and then add the sausage and add some onion, garlic, tomato sauce.
Well, that's kind of half homemade.
Yes, it's thrown together.
Right.
Anybody can do that.
I mean, yeah.
But I don't know. I just...
I mean, it's one of those dishes where, except for only twice, because I was actually with a group of tourists in a very high-end place, had cassoulet that I assumed was made at the restaurant. But then again, I have no proof one way or the other.
Yeah. Well, I suppose you can have a chef who's just interested in making it from scratch, and good for them. But I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it adds that much to the experience. And it's the kind of dish that you would serve to somebody who's hungry, somebody who wants a nice, big, filling meal.
Right.
It's usually served in a nice, big circular...
I don't know. Hardly anybody ever finishes it.
Oh, I've finished it, but I like to eat.
Yeah. I don't think
I take my time, right? I'm going to sit there for an hour and pick at it.
It's a lot. It's a lot of food. It's a lot of
Yeah, it's a lot.
Okay, so this is a question that's connected to it, but it's not exactly the same subject. Is it legal for a restaurant to say something is homemade when it may not be totally homemade?
I don't know. I have no idea. I don't know what the definition of fait maison is.
Yeah.
Because, what are you going to do? They didn't grow the beans.
Right.
They bought... Any restaurant will buy... And in the Southwest, it's really easy anywhere to buy all the pieces you need to put together a cassoulet.
And you can buy your own confit de canard. You can buy all of that already.
One thing that my mother did that I never saw anybody else do is that she would make it. So she would take a white cabbage, chop it up, boil it a little bit, and then pour cassoulet over it. And so when you served it, you had cabbage at the bottom of your cassoulet.
Oh, interesting.
And she's the only person I've ever seen do that. And it was just to make it a little lighter.
Right.
But of course, okay, I'm sorry, listeners, but if you put cabbage and beans.
Okay. Wait, I got it. Really? No, it's not exactly what I call light anyway,
Yeah.
Right.
You might blow the English out.
Well, maybe that's why they invented it to begin with in the 1300s. Who knows? Really. Yeah. But anyway, that's our little... it is actually... if you are in the vicinity, it's a lovely place to stop to walk around the basin. It was charming to do the walk around.
Right, so I wouldn't say go there to spend a week.
No, but you're going to go somewhere close by. If you're going to go visit the Canal du Midi, if you're going to go up into the hills that lead into the Black Mountains, which is north of it, if you... it's really worth a little stop.
Yeah, it's good for a stop.
It's good for a stop.
And I think I'm going to advocate as much as I can for people to stop in these little out-of-the-way, not very well-known places in France because they have a lot of charm. You'll have a good time for a day or two.
Yep.
Look around, lie in the grass, sit on the bench, whatever it is that you do. Yesterday, Elyse.
Yes.
Yesterday was Sunday. Usually on Sunday, I'm very busy because I put out the episode. And if I'm not quite done, I'm rushing to finish it, right? Yesterday, I was all finished by Friday this week. And I need to keep doing that because on Sunday, I actually got to lie on my transat. How do you say that?
Well, it usually would be a chaise longue.
Chaise longue.
Yeah.
Oh, so that's funny. So it's a French word that we don't use.
Right. Like Bastille Day tomorrow. Nobody in France says Bastille Day.
Right. But okay. So I was sitting out there on my chaise longue.
Right.
And I just fell asleep. It was lovely.
Was it lovely?
It was just lovely. Under the tree, under the shade of the tree.
It was nice yesterday. It was breezy.
Yes. It was a little wind. Oh. So if that's the kind of day you want, Castelnaudary is perfect for that.
I also think it's a great place if you're going to do something close by. Even if you're going to do something like go to Carcassonne from Toulouse or go to Toulouse from Carcassonne.
Yeah, you could stop.
You can stop there. It's really, and I have to say...
Take the small roads instead of taking the highway.
Exactly. The place nearby, I don't remember if we've actually talked about it when we talked about the canal, which it's very close by, but you need a car, of course, is where the waters divide between east and west.
Le Col de Naurouze.
It's called the
dividing line. It's kind of the place where waters flow naturally towards the Atlantic or towards the Mediterranean.
It's really a neat place to stop as well. And
it had a lot to do with keeping the canal with enough water in it.
Exactly.
So they had to build a big reservoir up there, whatever.
And so it's I agree. It's one of these places where it's got its own secret little charm, and it's certainly worth a little stop. And we'd stopped in this. It open all day Sunday, which is also good to know. Mm-hmm. 2 cafe bakeries that are right along the canal. Mm-hmm. That were absolutely charming, that made their own stuff. And
there used to be a lot of windmills in the area.
Yes.
I don't think that there's many left today.
I don't think so. We saw one.
Cugarel. Yeah, Cugarel. Cugarel.
Yep.
But I don't know if you can visit it. It looks like a windmill.
Right. Well, the thing
nice.
is, it is true that if you drive out from there and you go into the hills, the Lauragais is really pretty.
Oh yeah, it's very beautiful. It's very kind of rolling hills and a lot of wheat, which means
sunflower right now that are beautiful.
Yeah, because when you grow wheat and you never grow wheat year after year after year. Right. You would kill your ground. So they usually do wheat some years and then sunflower
and then barren.
Or they do alfalfa,
right?
Which is. Right. And then they just turn it over and let the soil regenerate.
The French still know that you're supposed to do that, and you don't deplete the soil that way.
Right. Well, some of them do.
I mean, it's true. There's more of that still here than there is in the States, where everything is just one monocrop, and then just.
Nowhere in France do you have, a field of wheat that goes for 100 miles.
No.
Never, ever. It's never been done because it couldn't be done. You have these fields that are adjacent; they belong to different people, and so and they do different crops, or they rotate the crops, and so the landscape is ever changing, which is one of the reasons why people love the Tour de France so much. Speaking of which, our Tour de France should be underway, but it's not. Right. It's going to be in September, so we'll see. Hopefully. It'll proceed.
Right. So we drove through beautiful areas with lots of sunflower, and then the wheat was already cut. But it's a very beautiful rural area.
Yeah, on my little walk, they've harvested the wheat, and I was very worried because there's birds that nest in the wheat, right? And I can hear the little birds. They have this little beep. Beep. It's like a beacon. The babies. It's like a constant beacon, and I stopped hearing the beeps before they harvested. So I think the fledglings actually flew. They were fine. I'm hoping.
Annie's protecting the babies.
Well, I always think about the birds. I like the birds.
She likes birds.
Yeah, they're beautiful. Right. Thank you so much, Elyse. It's been a delight again. And
thank you so much, Annie.
And everybody, 300 episodes. Who knew?
Who knew, huh?
Because when I started this, I knew nothing. I didn't talk about this, but I will spend a minute. I didn't know how to do a website. I didn't know how to record audio. I didn't know how to edit audio. I didn't know how to do photography. I was just starting out with my interest in photography. I have learned so much since 2014.
You have. You had an idea, though. You had a great idea.
I had an idea, and I was not going to give up. And like you said, I don't give up. But it was a steep learning curve. So if any of you out there are thinking about starting a podcast, go forth. But it is not something that's easy, and it doesn't grow quickly. Okay, at first, it was like, I think the first month, we had 200 listens.
Which seems like a lot for the first month.
Well, it was a ton of work to get 200 listens. It was really like, jeez.
At the beginning, weren't we doing one a week?
Well, yeah.
One every other week?
No, it was one a week. I always tried to do one a week. Some weeks I skipped, but for the most part, it was one a week. But, it starts really slow. And you had never talked into a microphone. I had never talked into a microphone. No. It's not like we had friends we could call and say, hey, my buddy who works for NPR, he's going to set me up and he's going to interview me on this show and everybody's going to hear about me because I'm so cool. No, we had nothing like that. We had you work in the travel industry. I didn't even do that. It's not like I could call somebody and say, hey, would you write an article about my podcast? Because, no, I didn't know anybody. I just decided I want to do this, and I did this.
That's true. That's true. I work in the travel industry. I feel almost sadly enough almost saying I worked in the travel industry because for the moment there is no travel industry.
For now, it's
hopefully
it's moribund, but it will come
really
back.
Pretty much dead for the moment.
Yeah, it'll come back.
It will come back.
All right, stay safe, everybody, and we'll talk to you next week.
Thank you, everybody.
Au revoir. Again, I want to thank my patrons for supporting the show and giving back. Patrons get several exclusive rewards for doing so. You can see them at patreon.com/join us. Patreon. Join us, no spaces or dashes. Thank you, all of you, for supporting the show. Some of you for many years now. You are fantastic. And a shout out this week to new patrons Catherine Miller, Eileen Sotomora, and Danielle Benecki. Thank you so much for becoming patrons and making this podcast possible. And I just published a new patron reward on driving in France. This time, all of these pesky roundabouts with lights in the middle in France and how you're supposed to make sense of them and take them. So we're getting more advanced in our driving lessons on the Patreon page. Somebody bought a camera using the Amazon link, which means it went from a commission of pennies to a few dollars with one purchase. So thank you so much. And it did not cost this person a penny more. Obviously, I don't know who did it, but thank you. So if you'd like to support the show without spending a penny you wouldn't have otherwise, before you go shopping on Amazon, go to the bottom of any page on joinusinfrance.com and click on the Amazon ad. The thing is, you have to remember to do it every time you shop on Amazon, so it's kind of a pain. But when you do that, you pay for all the expenses relating to producing a podcast like this one. And, it's about $100 a month. So thank you so much for doing that. For my personal update this week, I've got to say how one of the very few positive things that have come out of this pandemic and the severe slowdown of travel is that the Facebook group, the Join Us in France closed group on Facebook, is really quiet. I spend less time dealing with the public and much more time writing, and I'm a lot happier for it. So I've tightened the questions to join the group, and I make sure I only let people in who are podcast listeners. If you want to invite friends, ask them to listen to at least one episode of the podcast first, or I will not let them in. I want to reach people who love France and have a strong interest in making their next trip to France better than the last one. And you have demonstrated that you are that sort of person by listening to the podcast and being curious about France. And you want to get to know the place and its people. And that's the good side of travel, in my opinion. And that's who I want to spend time with. And I know I'm also talking to a lot of English-speaking people who live in France or people who'd like to move to France someday. You are my peeps, so there you have it. I'll talk to people via the email list more also. COVID-19 infections are still going up in France. The Toulouse area is in the red. So are Bordeaux, Marseille, Lyon, Paris, all big French cities. And most of the Mediterranean coast is in the red also right now. All the centers with lots of population and lots of people coming and going. The French health minister wants to get to 1 million tests a week. We finally managed to hit the 700,000 that he wanted. And now he's pushing on the accelerator to do even more. And I think the healthcare system can handle it. There is no talk of reopening France to visitors. But at the same time, there is also no talk of going back to the awful restrictive measures that we had to live under from the middle of March to the middle of May. To me, walking around with a mask isn't the end of the world. It's not my preference, but you know what? It beats getting sick. So, my husband and I went to Castelnaudary so I could take photos. It turns out I had totally forgotten this town, but I forgot how cute it is. Last time I went there was to hear my husband sing with one of his choirs, and he reminded me that there are a lot of English-speaking people in the area. There were several in his choir, and as a matter of fact, the conductor of that choir that day was an Englishman who's lived in the area forever. He raised his kids there, and he's kind of a famous choir conductor around here. So, but this last time I didn't stay very long. But this time we weren't just in and out. We looked around. We enjoyed the day. The town is so cute. It has a windmill, a basin, the locks. There are a lot of boaters going by. It's not very big, but it's got everything you need. A lot of stores. Really, it's pretty good size. I think 13,000 or something. It's not a rich town that spends, all sorts of cash keeping everything tidy and fixes up any eyesore or anything like in the Dordogne. In the Dordogne, they really go out of their way to keep it really, really tidy and beautiful. But they don't do that. Not that they have a lot of eyesores, but, it's real and it's friendly. There are lots of restaurants and cafes, a pretty big concert hall, an events hall. The guy at the tourist office spoke impeccable Spanish, and he told me he could also do English and German. We spoke French, obviously. He has the same accent I do, so it's perfect. He gave me all sorts of great info, including a walking tour map that I'll scan for you, and you can download as a PDF from joinusinfrance.com/300. And we looked at house prices, because that's a hobby of mine, and they are half of what you'd pay closer to Toulouse. But what is interesting is that Castelnaudary is only about a mile or two from the freeway. So it's definitely the kind of place where you can get into the city, within an hour, quite easily, as a matter of fact. So quick access to the big city. The landscape is lovely. It's hilly because the Montagne Noire is nearby. I mean, you should check it out if you're in the market for a house in France. And we had Cassoulet at a place called Chez David. It was my first time eating out since March, so it felt really great. The cassoulet was delicious. I asked all sorts of questions because I'm on a recipe testing kick, and I will definitely make that again, but once the weather turns a little cooler. Not yet. I think the hottest part of the summer is coming to an end. Thank goodness. I love the fall, so I'm really looking forward to that. If you enjoy the show, introduce a friend to the podcast and show them how to listen. Next week on the podcast, an episode about Le Chambon-sur-Lignon, a place of refuge for French Jews long ago and still a place of refuge to this day. So we're going to talk about World War II history. It's surprising how these little French towns sometimes have the kindest and bravest people around. Send questions or feedback to Annie@joinusinfrance.com. Thank you for listening, and I hope you join me next time so we can look around France together. Au revoir. The Join Us in France Travel Podcast is written and produced by Annie Sargent and copyright 2020 by Addicted to France. It is released under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives license.